I want you to visualize something with me, and I want you to take it seriously. Imagine your doctor straps you into a chair, tightens a blood pressure cuff around your arm, and then slides you into a massive metal tube. Once the door closes, the oxygen level in the room drops by about 25%. Your heart immediately has to work harder. Then, just as your body starts to adjust, the room begins shaking violently every 20 minutes without warning. If this were happening in a hospital, you would call it extreme. You would call it a dangerous cardiac stress test. But if you live with high blood pressure, this is exactly what you are voluntarily putting your body through every time you step onto an airplane. We need to have a serious conversation today. If you are managing hypertension, you have likely heard the same advice over and over again. Take your medication, reduce salt, try to manage stress. What no one has explained to you, not your doctor, and certainly not the airline, is the most critical factor for your safety at 35,000 feet. Where you sit on the plane is not a preference. It is a medical decision. There are seats on every aircraft that quietly overload your cardiovascular system. Seats that increase anxiety, restrict blood flow, and expose your body to stress levels your heart already struggles to handle on the ground. My name is Mila. I've been a flight attendant for 15 years, and I've seen the real consequences of these choices. I have held oxygen masks to the faces of older passengers gasping for air. I have cleaned blood from tray tables after severe hypertensive nosebleeds in the middle of the night over the Atlantic. And in nearly every one of those situations, the crisis was made worse or even triggered by where that passenger was sitting. Today, I'm taking off my uniform scarf and speaking to you honestly, the way a daughter would. I want to show you the hidden dangers built into cabin layouts, the misleading comfort claims airlines rely on, and how a simple seat choice can protect your heart. If you're new here, welcome. I've spent a decade and a half flying everything from short domestic routes to 16-hour long-haul flights. I've seen the glamorous version of travel, but mostly I've seen what flying actually does to the human body. I call myself a guardian of travel because airlines are not designed to protect your health. They are businesses selling space. They will assign a cramped seat near a bathroom to a 75-year-old with a heart condition if the system says it's efficient. I'm here to be the counterbalance to that system. My goal is not just to get you to your destination, but to make sure you arrive healthy enough to enjoy it. Let's start with the seat everyone dislikes, the middle. We all hate it, but if you have high blood pressure, the middle seat is not just uncomfortable, it is a physiological trigger. This has nothing to do with elbow room. Humans are wired with a fight-or-flight response that activates when we feel trapped. When you are wedged between two strangers, shoulders and hips pressed from both sides, your brain perceives danger. There is no clear escape route. For a younger passenger, this is irritating. For a senior with hypertension, it creates a constant low-level release of stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline. Your heart rate rises, your blood vessels tighten, and your blood pressure increases before the plane even leaves the gate. Airlines are aware of this, and they've learned how to mask it. You might hear them advertise that their middle seats are now wider by an inch. That is not generosity. It is a psychological maneuver. That extra inch allows them to narrow the aisle and window seats even more so they can fit additional rows. The middle seat remains a pressure trap, just packaged to look more appealing. That slight increase in width does nothing to relieve the feeling of being boxed in. I remember a full flight from Chicago to Las Vegas on a hot afternoon. In row 22, there was a small elderly woman seated between two very large men whose shoulders extended deeply into her space. Before takeoff, I could already see fear in her expression. About 2 hours into the flight, her call light came on. When I reached her, she was gasping for air, her face flushed, eyes wide, clutching her chest. She kept saying the walls were closing in. It looked like a heart attack. We put her on oxygen and asked one of the men to stand in the galley so she could have space. She wasn't having a cardiac event. She was experiencing a severe hypertensive panic response caused entirely by the claustrophobia of that middle seat. The flight nearly diverted. If the middle seat is a pressure cooker, the window seat is a quiet trap. Many seniors love the window. You can lean against the wall and avoid being bumped by the cart. But for someone with high blood pressure, the window seat carries a hidden risk rooted in politeness. Hypertension often comes with circulation challenges. The greatest danger during a flight is not a crash. It is deep vein thrombosis, blood clots forming in the legs due to immobility. If one breaks loose and reaches the lungs, it can be fatal within minutes. Movement is the only reliable prevention. But here's where the problem begins. Your generation values courtesy. If you are in a window seat, the middle passenger is asleep, and the aisle passenger has their tray table down working, are you going to ask them to move so you can stand up? Most of you won't. You will stay seated, legs still, bladder full, for hours because you don't want to inconvenience anyone. That politeness comes at a serious medical cost. I once cared for a gentleman in his 80s on a transatlantic flight from London to New York. He was seated at the window next to a young couple who slept almost the entire flight. He later told me he didn't stand up once in 8 hours. When we landed and everyone rose to get their bags, he couldn't stand. His leg was swollen, hot, and discolored. Paramedics had to carry him off the plane. He had developed a massive blood clot. His vacation began in a hospital bed. If you have high blood pressure, you cannot afford to sacrifice movement for manners. And that brings us to the only seat that gives you control, but only if you choose it correctly. And that brings us to the only seat that truly gives you control, but only if you choose it correctly. The aisle seat is not a luxury for someone with high blood pressure. It is a medical tool. It gives you autonomy over your own body in an environment where control is otherwise stripped away. You can stand up when your legs start to feel heavy. You can stretch, take a few steps, and activate the calf muscles that push blood back toward your heart. You do not need to ask permission or feel guilty for disturbing anyone. That sense of freedom matters more than most people realize. Just knowing you can move reduces anxiety, and reduced anxiety directly lowers blood pressure. However, this is where many people make a critical mistake. They book any aisle seat and assume the problem is solved. It isn't. Not all aisle seats are equal, and choosing the wrong one can still expose your body to constant stress. There is a section on every aircraft I privately refer to as the cortisol zone. It is usually the last 5 to 10 rows at the back of the plane. To understand why this matters, picture the airplane as a long lever balanced over its wings. The area over the wings is the center of gravity and the most stable part of the aircraft. The farther you move away from that point, especially toward the tail, the more exaggerated every movement becomes. When the plane hits turbulence, the front may feel a mild bump, but the back swings and drops more aggressively. This is known as the fishtail effect. If you already have high blood pressure, you are likely more sensitive to sudden motion. Every drop triggers a surge of adrenaline. Your heart rate spikes. Your blood vessels tighten. Now imagine that reaction happening repeatedly for hours because you are sitting in the last row. That is sustained cardiovascular stress, not a minor inconvenience. The physical motion is only part of the problem. The back of the plane is also a sensory overload zone. The engines are louder, sometimes significantly louder. Constant noise keeps your nervous system in a heightened state, and prolonged noise exposure is linked to elevated blood pressure. You are also surrounded by lavatory traffic. People stand next to you waiting in line. Doors slam open and shut. The vacuum flush echoes every few minutes, and odors build as the flight progresses. Each of these is a small stressor, but together they prevent your body from ever fully relaxing. I remember a summer flight crossing the Rocky Mountains, an area known for rough air. The seatbelt sign stayed on for nearly 2 hours. I was seated in my jump seat near the rear galley, watching the cabin closely. In the very last row aisle seat, there was a man in his early 60s. He was gripping the armrest so tightly his knuckles were white. His eyes were shut, jaw clenched. Suddenly, he began waving frantically. When I reached him, blood was pouring from his nose. Not a trickle, but a heavy flow. Severe anxiety combined with repeated turbulence can cause blood pressure to spike so fast that delicate vessels rupture. We used multiple medical kits to stop the bleeding. He spent the rest of the flight exhausted and shaken. That wasn't random. It was the environment of that seat overwhelming his system. So now we have ruled out the middle seat for claustrophobia, the window seat for forced immobility, and the back of the plane for relentless physical and sensory stress. Unfortunately, the airlines don't stop there. Some of the most dangerous seats for people with high blood pressure are the ones they charge extra for and advertise as upgrades. These are the seats that look good on paper, but quietly work against your circulation. Let's talk about the bulkhead first. These are the first rows behind a wall, often marketed as extra legroom or premium economy. Many seniors choose them believing the open space will help with circulation. On the surface, it sounds logical. Your knees won't hit the seat in front of you, but look at where your feet go. There is a solid wall. You cannot slide your legs forward or extend them naturally. This forces your hips and knees into a rigid 90-degree angle for the entire flight. That posture creates a compression point behind the knee at the popliteal vein, a major channel responsible for returning blood from your lower legs back to your heart. When that vein is compressed for hours, blood pools in your feet and ankles, swelling increases, and your heart must work harder to overcome the resistance. For someone managing hypertension, that extra workload is exactly what you are trying to avoid. I once had a tall, older gentleman flying coast to coast who paid extra for a bulkhead aisle seat. Halfway through the flight, he was constantly shifting and rubbing his legs. When he stood up to use the restroom, he nearly lost his balance. His ankles were so swollen he couldn't get his shoes back on. Sitting became painful, so he spent long stretches standing in the galley just to find relief. He looked at me and said, completely defeated, "I paid $100 for this." That money bought him discomfort and cardiovascular strain, not comfort. Now we need to talk about exit rows and certain premium economy seats. These are especially misleading. To store tray tables, airlines build thick, rigid armrests that do not lift. That means the seat itself is narrower than standard economy, sometimes by more than an inch. For passengers who carry weight in the hips or thighs, which is very common as we age, this creates constant pressure on the body. That pressure restricts surface blood flow and creates ongoing low-level pain. Your brain responds to continuous discomfort by releasing stress hormones to cope. Your blood pressure rises and stays elevated because your body never gets the signal that it is safe to relax. I once helped an elderly woman seated in an exit row aisle seat who endured 4 hours of silent discomfort because she was too embarrassed to say anything. When we landed and her sleeve shifted, I saw deep bruising on her upper arm from pressing against the metal hinge of the armrest. She suffered because the airline sold that seat as an upgrade. If the aisle armrest does not move, that seat is not appropriate for someone with high blood pressure. Comfort marketing does not equal medical suitability. And this brings us to another trap that combines biology and temptation: food, salt, and proximity. If you have high blood pressure, you already know sodium is your enemy. At altitude, taste perception is dulled, so airline food is heavily salted to compensate. One meal can contain nearly a full day's sodium allowance, but the real danger is not just what you order, it's where you sit. Rows near the mid-cabin galley are constantly filled with food smells. Ovens heat meals, pretzels warm, cookies bake. Smell bypasses logic and goes straight to the brain. You may board with healthy snacks and strong intentions, but after an hour of breathing warm, salty air, willpower weakens. Biology wins. I watched a passenger on a strict, low-sodium diet sit directly in front of the galley. He resisted for a while, then ordered multiple salty snacks. By landing, his fingers were swollen and his rings tight. He looked uncomfortable and discouraged. And finally, we need to talk about the most dangerous financial decision that becomes a medical one: buying the cheapest ticket. Basic economy may save $40 or $50, but it removes your ability to choose your seat. That means the airline assigns you whatever is left at the gate. And what's left are the seats no one else wanted. Middle seats, back rows, seats near bathrooms, all the zones we've already identified as high risk. And now we come to the most important part of this entire discussion, because everything you've learned so far only protects you if you act on it. Information alone does nothing for your heart. Decisions do. At this point, you understand that choosing a seat is not about comfort, loyalty status, or how much legroom a website promises. It is about controlling stress, preserving circulation, and maintaining autonomy in an environment that quietly challenges your cardiovascular system from the moment you board. So let's put this into a simple, repeatable process you can use every single time you book a flight. No guessing, no hoping, no trusting airline marketing. The first rule is absolute. If you have high blood pressure, you must choose an aisle seat. This is non-negotiable. The aisle gives you control over movement, and movement is medicine. You can stand when your legs feel heavy, stretch without apology, and take a few steps to activate the muscles that push blood back toward your heart. You do not need permission, and you do not need to feel guilty. That sense of control alone lowers anxiety, and anxiety reduction directly lowers blood pressure. The second rule is placement. You want to sit forward of the wing, ideally in the front third of the economy cabin. This area experiences less turbulence, lower noise levels, and fewer sensory disruptions. The ride is smoother, the engines are quieter, and there is less foot traffic from lavatories. Your nervous system notices this even if you don't consciously think about it. Fewer adrenaline surges mean less strain on your heart over the course of the flight. The third rule is flexibility. You must have standard, movable armrests. This detail is critical and often overlooked. The ability to lift or slightly shift the aisle armrest gives your hips and thighs space. It prevents constant compression, improves blood flow, and removes a subtle but persistent physical stressor that keeps cortisol levels elevated. Fixed armrests trap your body in a rigid position, and rigidity is the enemy of circulation and calm. Now here is where airlines quietly work against you. Their seat maps are designed to sell upgrades, not protect your health. They highlight colors, labels, and legroom while hiding critical details like fixed armrests, misaligned seats, reduced width, or proximity to galleys and bathrooms. So before you finalize any booking, you need to take one extra step. Look up your exact aircraft on a detailed seat review site. Enter the flight number. Read the notes. Avoid seats flagged for fixed armrests, limited recline, galley noise, or restricted space. Your goal is a standard aisle seat, forward of the wing, with no warnings attached. That is your safe zone. Now, I want to address the most common objection I hear because it matters. Many of you are thinking, Mila, I've flown for decades. I don't want to pay extra just to pick a seat. I'll take my chances. I need you to stop thinking of this as a comfort upgrade. This is not about luxury. This is about risk management. If your doctor told you that a medication would raise your blood pressure for 5 hours straight, would you take it just to save $40? Of course not. Yet that is exactly what you are doing when you buy the cheapest fare and allow the airline to place you wherever it wants. At 35,000 feet, there is no emergency room. There is no cardiologist. There is just me, a medical kit, oxygen, and a defibrillator. If your blood pressure spikes because you are cramped, overstimulated, immobile, and anxious, the options are limited. The best case scenario is oxygen and an unscheduled landing. The worst case scenario is something no one wants to experience. Choosing the right seat is one of the few variables you control before the plane ever leaves the ground. Use that control. I also want you to think beyond yourself. Your seat choice affects more than just your body. It affects the people waiting for you at your destination, the vacation you planned, the reunion you're excited about, the memories you want to make. I've seen too many passengers arrive shaken, swollen, exhausted, or hospitalized because they underestimated how much this decision mattered. I don't want that for you. So here is my challenge. If you have a flight booked right now, log in today. Look at your seat assignment honestly. Ask yourself if it meets the 3 criteria: aisle access, forward of the wing, and movable armrests. If it doesn't, change it. Yes, there may be a fee. Consider it an investment in arriving healthy enough to enjoy where you're going. That fee is insignificant compared to the cost of a medical emergency, a ruined trip, or months of recovery. I also want to hear from you. Think back to the worst flight you ever had. Where were you sitting? Were you trapped in the middle, shaken in the very back, wedged into a rigid seat that looked good on the booking page but felt awful in reality? Did you experience headaches, anxiety, swollen legs, or exhaustion that made no sense at the time? Share your story in the comments. When we connect those experiences to seat choice, we take our power back. I'll end with this. Having high blood pressure does not mean giving up travel. It means traveling intelligently. It means respecting your body and refusing to let an algorithm decide your health. You deserve to arrive calm, steady, and ready to enjoy your destination. Choose your seat the way you choose your medication, with intention and care. I'm Mila, your guardian in the skies. Protect your heart, choose wisely, and I'll see you on board, settled into an aisle seat where your body can move, breathe, and stay safe.